Defense Information Systems Agency is working on the rollout of the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability contract as a multi-cloud platform. Dave Donnelly, Area Vice President for DoD and Aerospace at Splunk, told me what he expects to see as the department executes on JWCC as a multi-cloud platform.
There are so many challenges. I always think of the Donald Rumsfeld or unknown unknowns situation. From our perspective at Splunk, we think about things from a visibility, security monitoring perspective. And I see that's probably one of the biggest challenges. Spent some time talking to the CIO, Mr. Sherman, and I know they're committed to the strategy. It makes sense, but that's probably one of the biggest challenges we see as the environment rolls out. How do I see across all four clouds?
Yeah. What does that mean for the end user, and what does that mean for the cloud program managers in each of the organizations as they sign on to the contract?
I think from an end user perspective, it's, user experience is something they constantly talk about as a major concern. I know the department, that's probably one of the biggest focuses they have. So how do you put zero trust around this cloud environment, ensure that folks have access, but also have the ability to get their job done? I mean, just let's be practical. If it's really difficult to get to applications, to use them, and to execute in your assigned role, then that's not good. So I think, again, that's part that has to be figured out.
Okay, so I think you asked it as a rhetorical question, but I'll ask it as a real question. How do you put zero trust into that environment, given that John Sherman and others are so committed to that concept too?
It's not a single tool or a platform. It is collaboration. They've invested heavily, the department's invested heavily in best-of-breed security and monitoring tools. So with zero trust, DISA put out a policy, so framework, so how do we, using that framework, take advantage of all these investments that the department's made over the last few years? And I think, how do you do it? I don't exactly have the answer, but I think if industry looks at the framework, tries to work within that they can effectively get there over time.
It's a word that I'm hearing a lot on the floor here, and that word's resilience. And you and your colleagues at Splunk have talked about it a lot over the years that I've been in this space. What does resilience look like in your view in this multi-cloud world that we're talking about?
Yeah, so we talk about digital resilience often. It's really evolved well past redundancy, right? That's 10 years ago thinking. It's more understanding if the applications that you're trying to use are 100% uptime, if the end user, back to that user experience, is able to accomplish the task they need to. And then finally, from a resilience perspective, is DoD owns a lot of legacy network, legacy applications. They can't all be replaced, in a short time frame. So resiliency also looks like pulling those capabilities in to modern cloud computing where it makes sense, and where it doesn't, having kind of a hybrid strategy to take advantage of both environments.
Yeah, I think the operative phrase in what you just said is where it makes sense, because for a long time I think there was at least a belief everything's going to go to the cloud someday, and I think not everybody thinks that's the case anymore.
Right, it just is not always, it's not always practical, and I think that's what everyone's starting to understand. Where it makes sense, have a good, strong cloud strategy, a SaaS strategy, but in certain environments, classified environments get very complicated, special access programs, things like that. A cloud may not be the right solution, but again, I see the department as they work through, doing a better job of assessing what can go where. Yeah. And that's just really a big part of it, is understanding that assessment, what that looks like.
The discussion around cloud and the discussion around zero trust just about always attaches the word journey at the end. What do you think this journey looks like at some future point as JWCC becomes a mature concept and the departments, the services have signed on and so on, zero trust becomes more embedded into the way that organizations do cybersecurity inside the Pentagon? What do you think these journeys look like for these people?
I think the journey's probably longer than we want it to be, but then again, the DoD's been around for quite a while. So if something might take industry 2 or 3 years, it may take the department 7 or 8 years to do it. So I think that's probably the biggest thing to be aware of, is it really is a journey. This isn't something that we're going to sprint to. It's going to take, again, quite a few years and a lot of learning about things that work, especially in the cloud environment. Users, you've got, especially in the Defense Department, you've got tactical people out in vehicles, planes, ships. So is it always going to work for them? There's a lot of learning that's got to come with that. And I think that's probably the toughest part of the journey is enterprise networks, sure, it's easy, but what about all those folks at the tactical edge? I think that's part of the journey we still have to learn.
Less than 30 seconds left. Back to visibility that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. What do you think that looks like at some future point? What are people able to see that they've realized that vision of visibility?
So right now what they can see is probably really limited, and I think that's one of the challenges, again, from the CIO on down. Are if I look out, can I see my cloud readiness, my uptime, my availability? Yes, but there's so much more complexity in the cloud, microservices and things like that, that they're going to want to have that. And again, like you said, in a multi-cloud environment across all of the clouds that they're running their applications in.
Dave, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.